Alright, hey guys, to another Aderonn Airsoft review. This is the how-to video on my homemade M203 Airsoft grenade launcher. So, first the materials. You're going to need basically just a rod of any sort, or sort of a plate of metal. This is just going to act as sort of the spine of the M203, basically the structural support. Next you need a hinge, preferably a thin hinge. But you will end up cutting this anyway. A piece of PVC pipe. This is 1.5 inch PVC pipe. It'll be able to fit a 40mm grenade into it relatively easy with just a little bit of sanding. You will probably need a piece probably 5 to 6 inches long. You need a caulking gun like this. You'll need some sort of carry handle or some way to get a small attachment piece for an RIS system. This is just an old carry handle that I used the back sight off of, and basically would just cut off the rest of the carry handle and use the little RIS attachment piece. Next you'll need some Velcro, and here I used a leather belt, which is what is recommended. And finally some zip ties. To hold it all together you need some JB weld and some camouflage paint. I use Krylon OD green, but basically any paint will work. You'll also need some electrical tape. So first, take your metal rod or whatever the spine piece is and cut it into 3 pieces. One piece will be 4 inches, one piece will be 3 inches, and the last piece will be whatever is remaining. Basically it's just scrap. First, take your 3-inch piece and bend it in a 90-degree angle. Then take your hinge and cut it like shown. Wrap the narrow end of your hinge in electrical tape. Also, one thing that I'm not really going to mention each time, but should be sort of done anyway, is make sure you always sand the edges of the metal pieces you cut. Not only to make it look nicer, but just to avoid any sharp edges that you could get cut on. Then sand out one end of your barrel. It is good to have a 40mm grenade, or airsoft grenade, that you are going to use in it, so you can test it out, see if it's sanded out enough to fit in, and then make adjustments and keep sanding until it does fit in almost completely with just the little outer lip hanging out. Now, JB weld your hinge on. Only glue the narrow end, leave the other end loose. Now you're going to want to glue on or JB weld on your 90-degree angle and then your medium-sized metal piece. Once it's all glued, take it off. Take off the tape that you use to secure it. I use tape and zip ties to secure all mine and stuff to keep it from dripping or sort of sliding down due to gravity. But this is what it should all look like in the end once you take that off. Here's another angle. It should be able to swivel out like this. Now cut your carry handle like this. I'll use the annotations to highlight the pieces that you'll still need. Basically just the attachment pieces. Then glue on the base part from the carry handle that you cut off onto the rail like shown. Leave the other 2 pieces off just to avoid getting JB weld on them. Now take your carry handle. You're going to want to cut the handle off. I find it's best just to make narrow cuts onto each side, because the attachment piece will the whole thing will just fall off, because the trigger isn't really attached on to the body of it. So just make some thin cuts on each side, and then since I couldn't get my Dremel in on the back of the grip, just bend it back and forth until the metal snaps. Now cut off the front tray piece of the caulking gun. Then cut the metal rod. All you want is this back piece right here that is shown. Now take your electrical tape and just make a small roll of it like this. I put in some Airsoft BBs that I found on the ground inside it, just to keep some open spaces in there and to increase the mass without having to fill that with electrical tape. Now feed through 3 zip ties and zip tie it on to the back of the caulking gun. It should look like this. Now take the front tray piece of your caulking gun, cut off the metal spike piece. I don't know the technical name for it, but cut that off, and then cut off the little front end piece. And take the front end piece and make it square so it can fit onto the back of your caulking gun like this. Basically, you're just doubling up the front piece onto the back piece to give it a little more of a protective shell. Here's another angle. Finally, just glue it all together. I put it in my vise to sort of clamp it down, and the only reason there's a wet paper towel there is just to keep the JB weld from dripping onto the vise and sort of gluing it all together. Finally, once it's all dry, preferably the next morning, leave it overnight to dry, but take some little pieces of plastic or whatever you find laying around and just glue them on to the side that it doesn't swivel out to, and this will just act as a barrier to keep the barrel from swinging the wrong way. Tape that up, and then you can spray the base of the gun. Now you're going to want to take your belt and cut a small strip. One end will be glued onto the trigger part, and the other will be velcroed on to the barrel. This will act as a latch to keep your barrel from swinging open.